Hello, this is Mark Holmes again, the editorial director of Via Satellite, and we have another of our Thursday morning conversations. And this time, I'm a little bit jealous because we're going to Colorado, a place I was supposed to go in June, but I'm afraid I couldn't go this year for obvious reasons. But I get to go to do a Thursday morning conversation, and I'm delighted to welcome Katherine Monson, who's the CEO of KSAT Inc. So, Katherine, how has life been in Colorado over the last few months?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mark. And actually, I have to say, I'm very grateful to be here in Colorado. As you may know, we used to have our US headquarters in the Bay Area in California. So my husband and I actually just moved here to Colorado about a year ago when we moved the office. And I am so grateful to be running through this period here. We have beautiful weather, which is lovely, so much, open space, so many trails to go walking on. So I think all things considered, we really can't complain.
I think I was jealous before I asked that question.
Oh.
I'm even more jealous now, but
I certainly didn't help on that front, did I?
You certainly didn't. But let's talk. I mean, one of the things we've been asking people, we've been talking about sort of movies, music, dramas, what sort of things they've been watching or doing over the last few months. So any sort of recommendations, any sort of movies or dramas you particularly enjoyed watching?
It's a good question. My husband and I, early on in this, I guess mid-March, we decided we were going to try to watch all of the James Bond films, starting in order. Since I had seen most of them, he had seen most of them. There were a few that both of us had not seen, and it's been a bit of an interesting project. I certainly have more opinions about James Bond now than I ever did before. For example, we noticed that there is a trend, particularly in the earlier films, where there is either a shark or skiing. And it seems like each film has one of those two, which is something I would have never noticed before. But now that we all have time to pay attention to such things, we always laugh when we're like, oh, it's a shark movie.
So how many have you got through roughly?
So we just started The World Is Not Enough.
Okay.
So we're pretty well through. We're, I guess, about midway through the Pierce Brosnan era now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular favorite one that you thought was?
Oh, I mean, I do particularly enjoy all of the movies that have some space or satellite elements. I think I'm probably not a particularly fun person to watch the films with because I like to be the fact checker and say that doesn't make any sense. For example, I thought it was quite funny in, oh goodness, what is that one called? Is it GoldenEye, where they have Arecibo Observatory? And it's hilarious to me that with a layperson audience, of course, you would think that an extra big antenna is extra evil. So I thought that was pretty funny when the spacecraft is presumably, in a LEO or GEO orbit and it's not, heading to Mars. So I thought that was pretty funny.
So you can still watch James movies with your sort of space satellite head on and like, oh my God, look at that.
I think it's hard to turn it off. I don't know if you have that same feeling, but yeah, like I said, I'm probably not a super fun person to watch the movie with from that perspective, but my husband is also a software engineer. So he does the same thing when it's, anyone who's hacking anything and all of a sudden it's just binary on the screen. And he's like, I don't think that's exactly how hacking works.
I just get sort of, whenever there's a satellite in a movie or in a James Bond movie, my daughter will go, oh, look, that's what Daddy writes about type thing. And then that's about as far as it goes. I think my brain naturally sort of switches off quite easily. So it could be the most ridiculous satellite ever in a James Bond movie, but I'll be just looking at it, thinking, oh, it's okay and stuff. But so you've still got the Daniel Craig ones to come then?
We do, which I think is a good thing to look forward to. So I feel like I grew up with Pierce Brosnan being Bond. And, to me, he seemed like a natural Bond at the time. And now watching the movies sequentially, I've decided Pierce Brosnan, I think, is my least favorite Bond. So that has been an interesting realization. I think I do like Daniel Craig much better than I like Pierce Brosnan as Bond, which I know Daniel Craig was a controversial choice. So
is there anyone
that have strong feelings about this?
Is there anyone that doesn't like Daniel Craig as James Bond? I mean, I would say probably my least favorite was probably Timothy Dalton.
I'd blocked that from my memory. So maybe Pierce Brosnan is the second least favorite.
And, are you a music fan? What kind of music do you listen to, Katherine?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say that I am a big music fan. I think I'm very particular about listening to music based on the environment in which I'm in. So there's very different music that I'll listen to if I'm on a plane or if I'm in Los Angeles or New York, more urban environments, versus in Colorado, I found myself listening to a lot more, oh, I guess you could call it like folk or indie type music. I've been listening to a lot of an artist band called Lord Huron. We're supposed to go see them at Red Rocks. Unfortunately, that's of course not happening, but yeah, Lord Huron, I definitely have been enjoying. Lucas Nelson, son of Willie Nelson, I think is a good vibe for the mountains. So yeah.
So what sort of tunes do you get sort of started in the morning when you're, you know, about to sort of get working on the ground segment? What sort of gets you what sort of tunes get you going for the day?
So it's a good question. I think I do not like music as background noise or as background music. If I'm listening to music, I mean, my husband and I are a little bit audiophiles. We have a record player, we have very expensive speakers. So we will sit in our chairs in our living room and just listen to music. We're not reading, we're not looking at magazines, we're listening to music. So I think if I'm in work mode in the morning, which I am a morning person, which works well working with all of our colleagues in Norway, I don't usually have music on until 5 or 6 p.m. So that's usually my unwinding time. So probably not the best answer to your question, but my 5 or 6 p.m. music has been a lot of disco lately, which is a little unexpected, but you got to spice it up a little bit in these Corona times when, I move from this room, which is my office, to the room that's just down the hallway, which is the living room. So, got to have some differentiation.
So your lockdown has been all about James Bond and disco, which is
I know, it's strange, right?
combination.
Yeah. I don't know what that says about me, but yes.
I'm a bit of an audiophile myself. I love just listening to music, so I can fully sort of I can often have loud music and write a story, which I maybe shouldn't be going public with, because I think maybe everyone thinks I write in like a silent bubble or something like that. But I can definitely sort of empathize with you there. I mean, obviously, you talked about your colleagues in Norway, and we've all been working from home. How's that been sort of working out? I mean, tell us a little bit about the sort of changing nature of sort of the work, the specific work environment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think because we are so used to, our US team is working so closely with our engineering team and our project management team that's based in Norway. For us, it's a lot easier because we're used to already planning our day around trying to find people when they're available. So one of the unintended benefits early in this period was that when folks were all working from home, people were working more flexible schedules. So they were trying to say, okay, I'm going to take a morning shift if you can do the childcare, in the afternoon. So that was interesting because it actually ended up with a lot of folks being more available at kind of different chunks of the day. Whereas before, if you don't catch someone in business hours, you haven't caught them. So I think that actually was an interesting benefit of, we had folks who were working the evening shift because they'd done childcare all day, and then essentially they were on mountain time. So that was kind of convenient in some ways. I do think the experience, I'd be curious, Mark, to hear your experience in the UK. The impact of the virus in Norway, I think it was managed very quickly and very effectively early on. That has led to an ability to open up society. I mean, schools were able to restart. People are able to convene together. People are not wearing masks, every day, everywhere. That's very different than here in Colorado. My husband and I have been very careful. We've been very careful with our US team. We are not in the office at all. We're not able to socialize with folks. If we go out walking, the two of us, we have, big masks on. And I kind of laugh, actually. We have these KSAT buffs. So, it's big KSAT logos, and we're walking around looking like bank robbers in our neighborhood, which just would have been completely unexpected a year ago. So I think it's a different experience here in Colorado, and probably in the US more generally. I guess I can't speak to how it's been for other communities in the US, but certainly in my neighborhood, it does not feel like life is normal. Whereas I think there's one step closer in Norway to life is normal.
And we talk about the ramifications for the industry doing deals. It's a global industry, as we know, lots of exciting projects going on all over the world. How has it sort of been impacting the ability to sign contracts, do business, sell technology?
It's been very interesting, and it's caused me to change my views on travel because I feel like we're actually in fast forward mode right now. With everyone sitting at their desks and being available for meetings and phone calls, it does seem like the pace of business has actually picked up, which we've seen across our full US team, is that it's actually, we've been more busy in this period than it seems like ever before, to the point where we're wondering, how did we ever do all of this and travel before? So that's been a very interesting piece of it, is that I think folks are actually more focused and available to meet and quickly work through collaborations. I'm curious, I guess, about the impact. I think we'll see the impact, as you know, this industry just tends to lag a little bit. So we'll see if there's any impact in a year or two from now because of some of the delays that happen now with engineering processes. I think the biggest impact we've seen right now is unfortunately the launch delays. So, you know, when we look at a full year of launch plans, and then there's a whole 3-month chunk where nothing was able to launch, that's now consolidated all of those launches now through the end of the year. So that's a bit of a bummer. I was joking with someone recently, in some ways it feels a little bit like 2017, in that I'd gotten very used to everyone launching on time. I mean, SpaceX in particular has been just on clockwork and hitting some of these primary launch windows. We've seen amazing progress from Rocket Lab too, of being able to have just incredible cadences of being able to get vehicles on the pad and launched. Both of those companies were impacted by the COVID-19 delays. And it's just kind of funny because it feels like we're back on the early days of launch where everyone's like, oh, it's a launch window, but it's probably not going to happen. You should plan your vacation for the primary launch window. So that's kind of interesting. And I guess it makes me feel grateful that we have gotten to this period in the industry where things have actually been moving at very fast cadences. So it is unusual to feel it slow down.
I mean, you mentioned, it was interesting, you mentioned about the situation in Norway being very different to how it is in the US. And as someone that's responsible for sort of US operations and the US side of the business, has it made it more difficult because, you know, maybe the Norwegian office is able to do more things that perhaps you're not able to do at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've had on our team is that we've actually had 2 new team members join during this period. So Dan Adams, our director of government programs, joined and was in the office with us for 1 week before everything shut down. And then Kyle Brazil, our new director for the Lunar Network, has now started in June, so during the kind of height of the crisis. So I think that's been interesting in that, you know, 2 people onboarding to a team, they haven't had a chance to meet each other. They haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with me in person. We had originally been planning that we would get them over to Norway to meet more of the project management teams, the engineering teams that they do spend a lot of time coordinating with. And realistically, they're not going to be able to meet those folks in person, you know, probably for many months. It's hard to put exact timeline on all of this. I know we all have our hopes, but realistically, they're going to be completely remote with a lot of the folks that they rely on day in and day out. So I think that's been kind of an interesting challenge just at a human level. I think, you know, time zones are always tough. So with people on flexible schedules, actually, that's been an improvement, like I mentioned. So I think really it's more just the missing human element. We can pretty much do everything we need to do remotely. It's more just really trying to be careful. And I tell the team this too. Morale is more important than ever. I mean, we're all living in, you know, whatever the square footage of our living space is. You know, I very rarely venture more than a mile away from my house, which is crazy for me to say, since this is the longest I've not been on a plane since I was probably 14 years old. So I think it's more that I'm trying to make sure that we're all taking good care of each other and taking care of ourselves, because I do think that it's just an unexpected time and has unexpected impacts on people and their views of the world. So I think we really can't understate how important it is to do the right thing in terms of work-life balance, integration, however you want to call it.
I mean, talk to me about that sort of work-life balance. I mean, you talked about, you know, almost working in fast forward. I mean, do you think even when the situation is a lot better in the US that you will travel less now, or do you think it will just go back, or what do you think maybe 1 or 2 of the sort of the long-term, you know, implications, even when hopefully COVID goes away?
Yeah, I do wonder about a missing human connection. You know, I have so many good friends in the industry where a conference for me is, you know, very social. I get to see people that I just absolutely adore. You know, everyone's giving big hugs. I don't know if we're, as a society, moving to a place where we don't hug anyone that doesn't live in our like, in our house. I don't know. That seems like an odd thing to me. Handshakes, right? We've talked a lot in the US. Dr. Fauci has, said he hopes handshakes never return because it's a terrible vector for spreading any type of disease. I just think it's kind of interesting how those human connections, there's a reason we did that before. It's because it's a way that we symbolize and show respect and caring for other people. So I wonder what the new normal is going to look like in terms of how we interact interpersonally in a more physical domain. I do think that probably our team will travel less because we have shown that we can be very effective at home. And I think one of the things that's particularly challenging with folks on the road is back to work-life integration. You never want to make someone feel like they have to choose between having a happy work life and a happy home life, right? I mean, everyone should have both. And I think travel is one of those places of friction where it can start to really, cause difficulties in a home life if someone's not able to be physically present. So I hope that that's kind of a new normal where we can stop some of the friction that shows up around travel.
And, in terms of implications for the industry as a whole, I mean, you mentioned about launch, maybe going back to what it was like in 2017, but beyond launch, I mean, we've had some big stories this year when you look at what's happened with the likes of OneWeb, Speedcast, Intelsat. What's your sort of view of what we're sort of seeing in the industry right now? And, are we going to see more of that, or is the industry in pretty good shape?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And I've had a lot of these conversations actually with our team in Norway. The way that US bankruptcy law is structured, I think, is very different than what the word bankruptcy would mean, for example, in Spain or in Norway, especially the Chapter 11 process. So, I look at OneWeb and Intelsat, and certainly those stories make big headlines. I think the piece to me that's important to focus on is both of those companies come out stronger on the other end. So this has always been a very tough business. It's an space as a sector is incredibly capital intensive. It is more competitive than ever before. There are more folks coming online with more ideas as technology drives what is possible. Folks who are coming online, more recently may have technological advantages that then folks who have older, call it tech debt, need to try to figure out how they can still be competitive. And I think that drives a lot of interesting dynamics. I think what is good to see is that we're continuing to see that frontier be pushed. So, I think Iridium is an amazing example on this. I know Susie was one of your guests on the Thursday morning chats, and she's a role model and mentor for me. Iridium's a good story in this regard. You have a system that came online. There were financial difficulties. It was able to be reformed to be able to move forward in a viable way. And then Iridium Next, I think, is an incredible success story. So I do think that's just part of the natural evolution of the industry. And that is true for all other big, highly capital intensive industries. Like you could look at semiconductor as another kind of example of an industry where it's very capital intensive, it's very technology dependent. It's very tough to make those businesses close. And with as much competition as we have, it's good, right? I mean, it's really forcing people to do their very best. So I really think that's a positive thing. And I do think that the OneWeb and Intelsat stories actually have very good endings in a way that's good for those companies, but also good for the industry.
Well, obviously, I mean, being an editor of a satellite magazine, I much prefer writing good news stories. So I hope there'll definitely be good endings. I'm sure there will be for Intelsat. I mean, I think OneWeb is it's going to be interesting with the UK government and Bharti and some of the things they're looking to do with that system. It seems a world away from the other 4 billion that was the initial premise of that system, but it's a new dynamic to see a government invest in that way in a system like that. So that it's I mean, I think the jury's out and whether that's it could be something seen in a few years that it was an amazing decision by the UK government, or it could be looked at as, well, why did they do that? So I think it'll be interesting thing to play out. Final couple of questions, just in terms of KSAT, for the second half of the year. I know we're in the second half of the year now, but what's that sort of looking like? I mean, the teams are remote, in terms of bringing new technology, new services to market. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, and actually, again, I think this is where one of the unexpected benefits of this period is that with folks more available to be, you know, at their desk focused, available to take phone calls, we've seen really amazing progress with some collaborations. So we hope to be able to announce an interesting coordination, collaborative effort with a partner who I can't say too much, I guess. Sorry, that's going to be a really unsatisfying teaser. But we're really trying to figure out how do we integrate with other folks across the technology stack so that when customers come to us, you know, we specialize in that space to ground communications in both directions. But then we have this data that's at the ground station that needs to go back to wherever it can be helpful. So we're really spending a lot of time right now with some of the integrations on that. Once we have it at the ground station, how do we get that data, you know, to a server somewhere, to a cloud somewhere, because we're all going to be more successful in this industry when that data is more helpful, right? When someone is really getting value out of that data, that's what drives the revenues, particularly in some of the Earth observation domains in the industry. So that's where we're spending a lot of energy these days. Is we've gotten very good at our subsystem. The next step is how can we collaborate with other folks who have, you know, strengths in data security and data management and networking engineering to come up with some creative solutions that will ultimately make it a faster, cheaper process for our customers to get their data where they need it.
Okay, and just 2 quick questions to end on that partnership. When do you expect to announce that?
Let me just say broadly fall.
Okay.
That'll keep me out of trouble.
We'll do our best to keep people out of trouble on this conversation.
Right.
And just as a final, I have to end on, being a UK, I'll end on a James Bond question.
Oh, good.
Because we love James Bond here. We talked James Bond, we talked about music. Do you have a favorite James Bond theme?
Oh, in terms of the song?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, and that's quite funny that you asked that because I've become quite a critic now on some of these theme songs. I really like GoldenEye, I think, or sorry, excuse me, Goldfinger. I always confuse GoldenEye and Goldfinger, but I do think the theme song for Goldfinger is particularly catchy.
Who sung that one?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot. I'm going to have to do a Google search later.
I mean, just before we go, I would say I always liked Aha, The Living Daylights, because I suppose in Norway you might like that one as well. So Norway's biggest band, so that was always one of my favorite Bond themes. And I have to be honest, I do like the new Billie Eilish one as well, which my daughter got me into. Apparently it was Shirley Bassey that sang that one. So so yeah, I know the song. It's coming back. I haven't thought about that song in years, so thank you. That song will now be in my head for the rest of the evening. So
yeah.
That
it's
was
funny that you mentioned Aha, because when we watched that film, when I saw that it was Aha that had performed it, I was like, Aha. And my husband's like, who? And I was like, Norway's biggest band. And he was like, what? And I always laugh when I'm in Norway because I don't think Aha quite made it to the US in the same way maybe that it did in Europe. And it always is funny because Sweden has ABBA, and I don't think Aha quite was on that level. So it's funny that was one that you caught as well.
No, but Take On Me, I think everyone knows that song.
That's true. That is true. One hit wonder, though, is it unfair to say that? Is that too harsh?
I think Sun Always Shines on TV. I think there was some other good ones. I mean, I'm a Aha fan, so I'm probably the wrong person to argue with about Ahas and stuff. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Katherine, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. And as I say, when we finish all of these calls, I wish you, your loved ones and all your colleagues, safe health, and wish you all the best for the year. We are all part of a great ecosystem, and KSAT brings some great technology to the market. So I wish you and all your colleagues and everyone a good second half of the year going into next year. And thank you for your time today.
Yeah, Mark, lovely to chat with you.